Hello. Yeah, in this video diary, I want to talk about betrayal. Um, so, the reason why this comes up is I've had to work through some extremely challenging feelings because um, I had made a decision to get married very early on in my life. And I didn't do it as a desire of my own completely, but also as a gesture of kindness, a gesture of empathy, a gesture of compassion, or an attempt to understand what these things meant. And now, what I have to deal with today is this juggling between, am I stupid? Why did I have to lose all that time? Why was, why did I have to go through all of that? And why couldn't I something something something? So within the story exists a lot of self-hatred, disposability, confusion, and loss. So about 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, I had met somebody who needed help to get into Canada. And at that time, I cared about this person. At that time, I was starting to kind of get a practical sense of what the theoretical frameworks that I had learned about in regard to social justice when it came to um, the hierarchy, say racism, sexism, capitalism, neocolonialism, imperialism, heteropatriarchy, sort of the theoretical frameworks that I had, jumped into and had a hell of a lot of curiosity about. um, I had opportunities to kind of practice these frameworks. I met this guy, wonderful person. He was in university, he was very kind, he was a poet, very sweet. I was very curious about him, and I wanted to have a relationship with him. He was really invested in doing social good. At that time, I kind of was very black and white about reality. I thought things were either good or bad, and I thought I was doing a good thing in one way, but also following my heart in another. That of the opportunities that I had, I decided to take the hand of this person. Um, but also his story was really, I suppose poignant and really impacted me. Um, this person came from a country um, in the Caribbean, and the Caribbean is, there's many countries there of social instability, and so he started to invite me into the story of his life, um, and the story was with, like many people from the global south, a lot of struggle, a lot of brutality, um, a lot of difficulty, but also hope that things could get better. And I was really moved by him, and I wanted to support him in any way that I could. And so, beyond our relationship, I also supported him to become a citizen of Canada. Um, Beyond the relationship, I also supported him financially. So I wasn't rich, but I had, given that I was a white um, person from a wealthy country, I had a capacity to loan or receive a loan of money that allowed him to be able to live in the country. And so I took that personal sacrifice and wrote off a loan of significant money to allow him the opportunity to continue his studies in Canada, complete his education, and find a career in Canada. After I completed most of these acts, then things started to kind of reveal themselves. Um, Small things started to happen. We decided to join this group, this activist group. So I kind of gave up this sort of liberal dream that I carried and wanted to hold more curiosity about the political. And I joined a bunch of radical left um, activists and tried to get a grasp of what it meant to be political. Um, but before I knew it, I was getting bad looks, cold shoulders. I would get distance from people. I would get conversations that didn't go beyond surface level. Some things felt okay, but in many cases it felt like people kept distance from me. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. Sometimes I've always felt that it's hard to know when some place is right for you or not. And I mean, at that point in my life, I was very depressed. I was I was lost. I lost my job. I lost everything. And what I would do is I didn't know what to do. I just sort of sat in that house with all these activists and with cold shoulders and completely different lives, and I would spend hours of my day trying to figure out a way for them to like me. Um, I would read these difficult books, both of personal interest, but also in relation to the people in the house, about social justice. But deep inside, I would be crying all the time. I would be meditating. I would be eating too much to fulfill this painful feeling of loneliness, that if I just read the right books or if I just become the right person, eventually they'll accept me and I'll be a proper activist. And that's what kept happening. Was I would talk to my husband and he would tell me, be like, Dylan, no, that's not the right way. You shouldn't be reading the books. You should be becoming more attuned to yourself. So that means you should be reading books about Métis identity, or how about you talk to, some of the other people in the house. So at that point, I tried. I was starting in some sense to read books in relation to who I was, um, but it didn't solve anything. I still felt alone. I still felt disconnected. Um, I did connect with people, but it wasn't easy. I tried to get an understanding of people's worlds, but dealt with so much rejection. I remember one time through, I mean, it was year two, no friends, nothing, just me pretty much, going to the library, reading books, and I passed by a friend of our group, and she looked at me from top to bottom, and with disgust, she saw, from my perception and my knowledge at that time, that I was a white cisgender man and I didn't deserve attention or respect. So some people within this particular circle were, you know, exclusionary radicals. Um, they weren't willing to even give energy to people who held privilege. And moments like that started to help me to put together the pieces that it might not just be that we're not compatible, but there's people are actively attempting to create divisions between the oppressed or those without privilege and the privileged. So, I mean, it took almost 2 years or 2.5 years, 3 years for me to kind of put the pieces together to start to realize that maybe it was never supposed to work out. And as I started to, not just intellectually understand that, but sort of emotionally understand it, and things started to reveal themselves. As one night, I sat down with my roommate, and she, through a moment of anger, told me that it was never supposed to work out. After that had happened, I was further isolated. I almost completely disconnected from everybody. I went into a state of psychosis and madness and was experiencing hallucinations to the point where on the birthday of my ex-husband, I went down to check on the party, or the day after of the party, and there was a cake left, a piece left on the table. And in that piece was, I bit into it, and there was a piece of like a toothpick. And given how much tension was being experienced in that house, I immediately thought that this was an intentional act of violence, knowing that possibly I was going to be coming down the next morning and they were wanting to create some sort of vengeful act on me as a white person, as a sort of symbolic violence against me as a means for the social injustice that they were experiencing in their lives. So I didn't know what was going on. You can see how much gaslighting I was experiencing at this point in my life. I was, it was in a form of insanity. And I didn't have the funds to just run out. At that point, I had no money. So I couldn't go anywhere. I at that moment, in the only situation I had, I ran to my husband who was manipulating me, and I told him what had happened, and he told me it wasn't real. So this was my betrayal. In one way, I mean, I felt like I did something good for this world. But from this lesson, I learned that things aren't so clean cut and understandable. That even bad things happen to good people, and even good people can be bad people. And that there was no real, in some sense, clear division between good and evil in any sense, or good and bad, and all things were more so within this gray complexity that we kind of have to live under and understand how to survive, really, as a prime imperative of survival for the species, or survival of the individual. So yeah, that was my betrayal. That was the one moment, and I'm still processing, because I'll go through rages depending on my mood. I'll go back on that as why did this happen to me? Why was I betrayed? And then on another moment, I'll be like, you know what, whatever. It just happened. I'm just happy that there's with whatever happened, maybe some good came out of it. So yeah, I guess that's betrayal. I felt it, and that's just what happened. So what does betrayal mean to you? Have you felt betrayed before?